There we are. We are live. It's changing my glasses. I just pulled in today, driving from job to job. It's kind of different being a builder who builds in so many different temperature zones. Oh my goodness, going from 6,700 feet to 2,200 feet in elevation. One's dry desert. One's high mountain with massive snow loads. And then in between that, really in between that. So I'm thankful because it gives me just an incredible amount of perspective on builds and technology and what to do there, but don't do it here. So my HVAC, my heating is completely different at a higher altitude, especially where there's cold. Completely different. So maybe we can talk about some of that as we move forward today, and we'll start taking some questions, and I can iterate with some things that's on my mind, some things that we can all consider for this next year. A lot of things to think about. I've got a lot of great comments on posts that have come out. Maybe we can talk about that. Open space, that's a great thing to talk about. Should you build a home with a big open space? Or should you partition it off? Maybe some of the things we can talk about. If you have questions on that, a lot of that's on my mind. So let's go ahead and start with some questions real quick. Question? Oh, great. That I can jump in with it. I wasn't sure. My wife has a lot of commentary going on over there, and I never know what's happening with the questions. So she's going to tap me on the shoulder when some stuff starts to come in here. If a lot of you have noticed that there's kind of like there's a trend there for a while, and it's still kind of a trend right now, and that is the barn dominium home, or they call them a barn dough, and it's really nothing more than a big open space. Okay, if you saw in a video I just recently posted that we put out probably Tuesday night, and it's basically talking about attic trusses, and a lot of people ask me what the cost of that build was. And it was around 198, between 198 and 225, basically for the whole shell. And that finishes the outside of the shell as well. Welcome, my daughter's here.
Hi.
And that's really, here's something to think about. I like to grab as much square footage for the least amount of money that I possibly can. All right. That's really the name of the game. I just met with some people. I had a client that they have 8 children, and they're really, what can we do? How can we do it? And then they're also thinking about the future, and they know that a lot of their children would probably stay home, maybe get married. They need a place to stay, but they can't afford anywhere, so they're going to hunker down at home for a while. And it used to be that we would have a basement. I've talked about this before. Back in the day, when my wife and I got married, we remodeled my grandmother's basement. It was finished. It was unfinished, so we finished it. And that was the most affordable, cheap way. If we didn't have that, we couldn't have survived, right, honey? Because we were making hardly anything back in those days. And so the neat thing is the generation that came before thought pragmatic, oh, let's just now in our generation, what can we do to plan for the future? Well, concrete is such a high price right now. Portland cement is so costly. Cement isn't as cheap as it used to be. It's just not. All right. What's the average foundation right now?
I can't answer that question.
Well, what do we pay for the foundation on the Pinestead job?
Oh, for Pinestead, for the walls,
Yeah,
it was $30,000 just for the walls.
Just for the walls.
Yeah,
okay. And we're not talking a full height wall. Some of it is a crawl space wall, and it's not that big compared to what some basements are. Okay. Yeah. It's kind of a drive-in garage. So there's a big 18-foot section. There's no wall at all. Mm-hmm. So that's about $30,000. Okay. The trusses on that job, okay, for the detached garage on the post that I did, they were $14,000, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
$14,000. Okay. Now I want you to just think about 2 things here. Okay. If you do a basement, you're going to have to fur it out anyway. So that's all the 2x4 studs anyway. And then you're going to have to put the drywall and insulation and all that. Okay. Well, Why do that? Why have all that expense for now? You have a walkout basement, you have a hillside. Some of these things require that type of a situation. But if you've got a pretty much level ground, all right. Now imagine that your slab, what's the slab foundation on that one?
I think they were both 30.
About 30 grand.
Yeah, they were both 30.
Okay. So I got trusses up above, an attic truss configuration, all right. And I got a slab configuration here. And with the sheeting on the trusses, all right, we're probably around 30 and 30, close to 60. Probably the shell and the sheeting and the foundation and all that, we can probably just minimal get around probably around 80 or 90 grand, okay? And then you add windows, and then you add a lot of other, infrastructure. We had to do some upgrades on the foundation on that one because we had a hillside that was coming into the garage. We had to lift that 4 feet, kind of a stem wall as a retaining wall. So some of those costs kind of increased to that. But if I had my druthers, and if I were to go back in time, I would go after just one big, massive garage with a huge loft above it, and you can partition that off any way you need. In fact, when you have little kids, all you need is a little kitchenette and a little bathroom. Partition that off and leave the whole thing open space, and just everyone camp out on the floor. The thing I'm getting at is that if your main goal is the potential down the road, all right, then you go for that potential now, and then you can be creative with how you partition that off later on. All right. I've seen a lot of, that's the neat thing about the barn dough. And I'll talk about the cons of the barn dominium at the same time. But you can capture so much square footage with that attic truss configuration. I'm going to do a whole elaborate post on this, actually breaking down the costs, giving the pros and cons, the never do's and the never don'ts and stuff like that with regard to barn dominium and regular stick built. So look for that to come. But I really wanted to emphasize that sometimes I've seen a lot of families, when you have young kids, they can sleep in a corner with a bunch of bean bags.
That's what I did. I slept in the corner of his room. Yeah. On a futon. A futon. I didn't have my own room.
So I want you to just think about that. If you think about what your real situation is and what the situation is going to be down the road, they're completely different. But if you're thinking down the road, then you're actually solving for that now, although you don't have to go the full Monty on that whole situation. So these big open living potential is pretty powerful, rather than trying to partition everything off and everything designed and ready to rock and roll all for the future. Just have it for the now. And it's completely different. Think about that. And if I didn't buy this home, then I couldn't have grown beyond it. And that's another thing to think about. We can talk about all types of questions, but I really want you to think about creating and buying the opportunity for space. That includes land to expand. That includes the big open space to build, and then you can grow into it, partition it off later as you see fit. But those are the two things that a lot of people feel cramped in. I've dealt with clients in California with narrow strips of land. They have very little room. And the only thing they can do is to go vertical on that thing or go down into the ground. Most of the time it's vertical. But you can capture square footage if you're smart and if you're just looking at the square footage and not the rooms and bathrooms. Think of it in terms of that, and you can grab more square footage that way. But let's start taking some questions here. We got one from Michael. Very interested in your insight on the lumber and construction labor market in 2025. Variations in region across the U.S., asking about East Coast, specifically Virginia. It depends on well, you've got the Appalachians there. And so the Appalachians, I don't know how much lumbering takes place in Appalachia and all those mountains, but I'm suspecting you do have a lot. You do have greater access to oaks, hardwoods. We have access to Douglas fir and hemp fir, and those are the big trees, like with 2, 3, 4 feet in diameter. And so I don't know what your lumber mills are like. That would be very interesting to know. A lot of that's not as old growth as we've got back out west. And so it depends on how close your lumber mills are. But yes, That's something to factor in. And then you go to lumber yards and ask them, where do you source your material? Where do you source your lumber? Just ask them. And that tells you if it's, we get it from the west coast of Canada. Well, you know that's going to be a huge price increase because of labor and also cost to deliver that to that lumber yard. So ask around, find out how close that lumber mill is and where they source it from. And that's going to really help you see the price and where it should be in your local area. So. So yeah, Josh, when should I stain and seal rough sawn posts and beams for patio and deck? I'll let Kinsey answer that.
Well, you're supposed to do it right away, aren't you? But currently on our project, we framed in June, and I still have not stained my beams. And they still look good. So, but I would say you want to do it right away. But
yeah, and to keep in mind that a lot of those stains and those sealers cannot be pushed through a nozzle, a sprayer. Mm-hmm. And they're very, very particular, and most of them have to be applied with a brush. And that's why we've waited on ours, because we didn't want them banged up or ruined. We can sand them down and fix them real quick before we do that stain and seal. Plus, we wanted a little bit of an age on ours because we didn't want to stain it a color. We want it to be, we like the natural look. Mm-hmm. So we were waiting for it to fade just a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and do a seal on that, and that will be it. And that will be brushed on. So it's really whether you want the natural look and it's just a seal, you can wait till later on that.
Also, we've had dry weather too. So
Yes.
it depending on your weather, if it's starting to get really wet, and you want to get going and seal those up. Oh
yeah, if you get a lot of rain on there, that can do damage. Rain has a way of graying wood really, really quick. Same with the UV damage, but when you combine the UV with the rain, for some reason wood will go gray really quick.
It looks like driftwood.
It looks like driftwood. So you want to watch out for that, but if you've got some protection on it, that might help. So hopefully that answers your question. Yep, framing is almost finished. When should I put house wrap on? Now. You want to put, the house wrap is not so much of an issue as the dry-in. The dry-in is what you want, especially if you see weather coming and you got rain coming. OSB is rated for 3 rainstorms. I don't know if you know that. Most OSB is rated to handle 3 rainstorms. After that, they can nullify the warranty. And so you want to make sure you get that dried in as soon as you possibly can. The sides of it, that can be delayed as long as you have some good eaves. If you've got eaves on your home, that's going to redirect water away from the home. That can be a little later, but it's the roof that's the most pressing. So, but if you feel like it's, and I don't like to dress the home with wrapping too soon, because if I see winds and you have nasty winds where you are, that's going to whip across there. And they only put that stuff on with a stapler. And it's just temporary to hold until they put the siding or stucco or whatever they're going to put on. So you can hold off until they have the actual finish that's going to go on. And when you know that's going to come on like in a few days, then you can put that on. But don't try to put it on too soon. It'll whip around and drive you batty. Okay, next question. Sergio, what to do about an undisclosed well? Half-acre lot, needs septic. I want it gone and worried about leach line issues if county finds it. Well has been covered for years at the edge of the property, California. Let me ask, is it the septic that's not disclosed or the well?
The well.
Okay, well, half-acre
Undisclosed
septic.
well.
Needs septic. Oh, needs septic. Okay. That well is going to be on a county record somewhere. And if it's capped, you got to leave it capped as it is, unless they've filled it up with concrete. So a lot of times counties, in order to do what's called like a water eminent domain, they'll come through and they'll fill up that well with cement. So if it's not filled up and nobody knows about it, nobody needs to know about it. But if you want that well gone, then I would go contact the county and find out what their protocol is for that. And they may or may not like you fitting concrete down there, because that's going to affect water and water table and all that, you might want to find just the health department. It's usually the county health department, and find out from them what they require and if there is any kind of amelioration for that. So, but if I had a well on my property, I'd try to keep it, but that's just me. So something that
sounds like good resale. Isn't that good resale? That's good resale.
Yeah.
I think you should.
If you have a water right with it.
If you don't have any water.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, if you have a water right still and you want to get rid of that, I would say don't get rid of that. Keep the water right, because that's value to the property. So I'll tell you, be honest right now.
Connected to the well.
Yeah. The septic is?
The water. Right.
Yeah, if it's connected to the property or to the well, sometimes it's both, sometimes it's one or the other. You want to find out. But I know that in Colorado,
California,
it's Colorado. A couple of years ago, they shut down well permits. I mean, literally. And why? Because they didn't want people to build septics. And they're trying to control and curb growth in particular areas in Colorado. And the way they do that is they shut down well permits, because if you don't have water, you can't put in a septic. They go together like that. So just check and make sure that you've got or you do or do not have water rights. If you do, keep that. That's especially in California. It's worth a lot.
Of money.
So
just move at that point. I'm just kidding.
So double check on that. All right. Next question. Michael, have you ever heard of lock and block polypropylene foundation blocks better than CMU or poured concrete? I've heard of them. It's kind of like the Lego situation. There are a lot of companies that sell that product out there. But given the fire scare in California, you would never, ever want to build with that product. Okay. Because this minute heat hits that polyiso foam, it's just going to melt in place. It's just going to melt. And so if you're worried about fires, it's not something I'd recommend. It does have a high R value, but I'm finding that a lot of people are having problems with the foam. Mice love to eat it. I've got some foam out here on the house where I've got condensate lines here, and I have foam covered all the condensate lines. Mice ate all the way through that whole sucker. All right. And they actually can crawl up and they'll eat away. For some reason, it's just nice on their teeth. They don't eat it, digest. It's just like a beesver. They're just bored. And so they're just, they probably take it in their housing and they use it for bedding. My wife's right. They probably do something because but it's like voracious. They'll go after that stuff. And so I'm not a fan of it right now. And so the only time I use closed cell foam is in the spray can for little gaps here and there. But that's the only time I use a spray foam, and then underneath foundations for a good thermal break. So check that. I'm not a fan of that. Plus the concrete. You look at the best wall structure. Just I'll keep it really simple like this: is how small that cell structure is for concrete. Okay, if the cell structure like that is, and your rebar is going to fit in the middle of that. That's kind of small, but I've seen cell structures that are like that big, and that's a huge amount of concrete with one stick of rebar. I've got a aerated concrete in my office. I got it for free. It was a test from a company. That cell structure is that big, okay? And I've seen them get smaller and smaller because all they need is just about 2 inches of concrete coverage around that rebar, and they've got the grid to fit the code, the engineering code. And so a lot of these manufacturing companies with these blocks haven't considered that. And they've got way too much open cavity for concrete. And that's going to be a huge cost too. So I haven't seen that product just meet my demands. Okay, moving fast. Kim Winter, my wife and daughter are telling me to move quick. Okay, I missed out on like 7 questions last week, and I don't want to do that. What does the elevation give you on the drawing? It should give your roof product. It should give your materials that are going to be on your wall. It should also indicate your fenestration, which is all your doors and windows.
And your finished floor.
And your finished floor, yeah.
The elevation should show you where your finished floor should be.
Right. And it will show you all those elevations. It's basically, if you're in an HOA, that's what they're going to look at the most. Mm-hmm. All right. They're going to look at what does it look like on the outside. And you can also give colors if you want, or give what's called a board for subdivision, a board.
It's
selections
the
board,
Selection.
a selections board,
Mhm.
and they'll ask for that in some very particular HOAs. So the more detail they have on that, then when you do submit it to an HOA, if you are in an HOA, then that's going to help them understand and see what it's made of. So it's all the exterior selections you're going to put on the home and the elevations, etc. So,
Mhm.
okay, Ty Tzier, hope I said that right. How do electricians charge for their work? By square foot or by wire pulled, fixture installed, etc.? What's a typical cost in St. George? It's per
can per fixture.
per dead
usually.
end. It's called a dead end.
Oh,
And so every time there's a plug, that's a dead end. If there's a light, there's a dead end. And then they factor in the number of circuits. So one or two rooms could be a circuit on for lights, and one or two rooms could be another circuit of 20 amp circuits for outlets.
mhm.
And it depends on how much of upgrade you want. For example, on all my builds, I do 20 amp circuit wiring for all outlets. I don't do any outlet in a 15 amp circuit. It's all that yellow wire, which is a 20 amp circuit, because I don't like things to blow, stuff like that. So electricians are varied. You're going to find some electricians that have been in the business for a long time. They might charge a lot more. Some electricians are really stable with their pricing, which means that they keep work coming into them. And some really that might be brand new. They might undercut them, find themselves under budget on that, and coming after you for some more money later on. How long have they been in the business? And here's something to think about. A really good electrician is going to try to place that meter panel and the main panel separate, but the main panel is going to be in a central location in the home, typically in a laundry or a mechanical room. Then all the home runs are going to be really short. The worst thing you can do is have just a simple meter and main panel with all of your circuits far away, and that's going to add up all your costs on electrical.
Mhm.
So just think about that. I've seen electrical go through the roof because they didn't think about placing those panels and meter panels. Okay, let's go to the next question. Alan, I used to be an electrician, so I could go on forever. So my daughter's kicking me and telling me move on. Okay.
No.
Alan Babchuk, what is your opinion regarding the different foundation methods? Do you think poles are okay for small builds? Poles meaning micropiles or pylons or piers? I'm thinking that's what you're meaning by that. I'm not a fan of them. All right, they're expensive. If it's wood, then you got some problems with rotting there. And I don't like the idea of weather getting under a home and having to maintain and manage that. So I'm a slab on grade and a stem wall, or a submerged stem wall, which is really if you have a frost protection. That's my best. That's my favorite, is a submerged stem wall in the ground. But slab on grade is about 80% of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
About 80% of what we do is slab on grade, and if it's done right.
That's also because we live in southern Utah.
We live in a desert area, and we appeal to a lot of retirees, and they like a zero threshold, no steps, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we do a lot of that. But I've built just about every foundation you can imagine. So, but my favorite is probably a slab on grade if you have the right soils for it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, Josh James, should I put plastic over window, doors, and garage openings while waiting for a few weeks for windows, doors to arrive to keep rain, snow out? You can if you want to, but the plastic is really to keep the heat in for the subcontractors. And typically you can put the plastic on there, and when they put the window, they'll just take it off.
Yeah.
But what I like to do is when I have the windows put up, then I have my drywaller come and I say, please plastic the windows. And what they'll do is they'll plastic all the windows before they put the drywall up. And that allows me to have, it protects the windows, first of all, from damage from the drywallers, which can be notorious.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also helps keep the heat in. And then when I need to, I can put a slit in it, open the window, and have some ventilation there during the summer months. And then it's very easy with a nice X-Acto knife, cut that out, take the plastic out, and then they caulk it when they paint, and it's all done. It's just a way to protect those windows. There's some windows that come with film on them. You can take it off and clean, but if you don't have that, I'm telling you, cleaning windows is not fun. And a good window cleaner is about $600.
Depending on how many windows.
depending on how many windows you have. So
Mhm.
I've paid up to $1,200 on windows cleaned on a home, and because and I like to keep them as protected as I can. So
Mhm.
hope that answers your question. Next one.
2 parts.
2 Park. Hype Stonks. Haven't seen you in a while. Hello, Hype Stonks. Hi, Keith. I'm getting ready to do insulation. Cool. What material do you recommend for baffles on a concrete block home? Okay. I see some of the builders using cardboard baffles, but the big box stores carry styrofoam and plastic. Use the styrofoam or plastic. And why? Because if you do have air movement in there and there's moisture in that air, it's going to get absorbed into that cardboard, and you don't need that to happen. And if that cardboard gets wet and stays wet for an extended period of time, that could create mildew and all that. The styrofoam, which is a closed cell product, and the plastic, it's not going to absorb into it. It's just going to move up into the attic space like
Wait,
there.
what are baffles?
The baffles, if you don't know, let's say there's a rafter in your home like that, and you've got insulation filled up in here, but you want air to come up through the rafter, up like this, and into that open cavity, and then up through the top of the roof. A baffle is about 1.5 inches to 2 inches of gap, where it's a product, a plastic or styrofoam product, you put right underneath the eave, especially the eave where the insulation comes in contact with the roof. And you put it between the trusses. You see them up in our room up here, or second story. And we put baffles in there because I wanted insulation all the way up against there, but allow for ventilation to come up there to cool off the attic. And so you don't use the cardboard. I know it's cheaper, but if you have any moist air, humidity air in your environment, that's not going to be good over time. Okay. Nick Felt. Nick Felt sounds familiar. I had a student named Nick Felt. We spoke prior about a build in Eastern Washington, Climate Zone 5. You recommended a hybrid crawl space, insulated stem wall with some venting. Can you talk about the assembly more? Yes. I think that was a high altitude, if I'm correct, Nick. And you've got a frost protection that's almost 30 inches or even more. And so the assembly on that is on a job I did up north where it was cold. Stem wall, 30 inches. So 10 inches is the footing. 20 inches is the actual stem wall. We put insulation on the inside of that stem wall. Okay. And then we backfill dirt against it and compact. And what that does is it keeps the cold from the outside from wicking inside that foundation. Now, a lot of people like to put insulation under the slab, but I don't like to do that. I like to put it right there and stop it right there. Now, keep in mind, it's not a perfect thermal break, because right at the slab, when that slab comes over the top of that stem wall, that last 3.5, 4 inches, that's the part that could still wick inside the home. But if you have a fenestra or a covering on your exterior, let's say it's stucco or even brick, I like to take that brick down past the transition where that cold pour joint is and past that. So that actually helps to break some of the cold wicking into that, 3.5, 4 inch section where it can wick. So I've taken care of the ground wicking, and then I've also taken care of that upper 4 inches or 3.5 inches by creating extra covering on the outside of that with a great product, brick, stucco. On the home I did up in Pine Valley, just north of here, we put 1.5 inches of rigid rock wool, and we came it all the way down past that transition. It wasn't a slab on grade, but we came down past the transition where the framing structure is, and then we have the basement. We came down probably a foot past that to add for additional insulation on that home, so we don't have the cold wicking inside the home. So there's other processes, but I think that's probably the most affordable for you. Who can install a full ice and water shield, and how much should that cost in cedar city? I don't know the cost, but anyone can install that. An ice and water shield is nothing more than a peel and stick product. You can pick it up at any box store and just look for the ice and water shield. And it's the first 4 feet you have to have your flashing on first. Once the flashing's on, then you put your 4 feet of ice and water shield. And that's typically all they need to do in code for your particular area. And that's basically for ice stemming. Yeah.
Oh.
It's a cold environment thing. Like A lot of guys in southern, like in the area here, they don't do ice and water shield. But you suddenly go up to a higher elevation where it's cold, you do ice and water shield because that stops or helps control ice damming. So it doesn't work back up into the substrate. And it's just the first row unless you want to go the full house. Like on the home I did up in the mountains up there, the Pinestead job, we did ice and water shield over the entire structure because we were dealing with bad weather and rain and all that. And I didn't get to roofing. I wouldn't have been able to get to roofing quick enough because we had a big chimney in the middle of the roof, and the mason had to get up there and make a huge mess. And so ice and water shield is great around those areas because it can handle the movement. If it's just a staple down product, it gets torn up and it's not good. Mm-hmm. So I used ice and water on the whole roof, but that's costly. If you don't want to do that, then just do the first 4 feet or talk with your zoning department and ask them what their recommendations are. But it's different from every area. So check with your local building official. They'll give you some feedback. Kaihun, if I have 12-foot floor trusses, 12-inch floor trusses, sorry, is that enough to run mini splits pipes inside the webbing? Yes, it's fine. All right. You just can't put the cassette system. There's a mini cassette system that fits in those trusses, and I don't think 12 is wide enough. I think it has to be wider. If you're doing a ceiling mount mini split, recessed cassette system. Yeah. For the wall mount ones, yeah, because that is only, that condensate line is only about that big, and that's all it has to do is fit through that web structure, and you're just fine. Okay. And again, how many linear feet is that 40K foundation wall? Linear feet?
How many linear
50 feet.
Only 50?
Which one foundation wall?
Do the Pine Valley in Pine Valley that
at the beginning.
linear feet.
Up in Pine Valley? Oh, I don't know. Probably.
Here's the plan.
30 feet.
No,
6. She can add it up.
It's 41. Just that west wall is 40 feet alone.
So one wall is 40 feet.
One wall was 40 feet.
And then we have 2 more walls that are close to that.
So 40 plus 26.
40 plus 26.
Plus 16. Plus another 16.
Almost 100.
Yeah.
About 85 to 100 feet, somewhere in that range. So.
With a little small, and plus the small one in the mechanical closet.
Yeah, there's a small half-raised wall. The reason why I did that, because I wanted to fit electrical through it. So we dropped one of the interior walls and made it just a pony wall and built a 2x8 wall on top of that. So it's in some of my old videos. If you look at some of the old videos, I actually walk through that and talk about it.
We just didn't measure it.
Yeah, we didn't measure that. So that was actually a good bid for all that concrete.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even add up all of it.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
It was a lot. So,
but it's still expensive.
It's still expensive. Yeah. Compared to a slab, it's expensive.
Yeah.
I was curious mostly because my architect wanted to place my ductwork in the attic, and I'd rather have it in a crawl space. I might do a warm roof design because of the 212 pitch. Yeah, and you might have some freezing up there on your condensate line too, if you have some freezing in your particular area. So, and that would allow ductwork to work better in the attic. Thoughts. If you have forced air in the attic, you want that forced air to be under the fluffy stuff. Okay, if it's not under the fluffy stuff and you don't have enough attic for all that, it should have between 18 and 24 inches, depending upon your code area. And if that ductwork is really covered and it's got some coverage, great. My old house next to me, my mom lives in there, and we used to have a forced air system. We don't anymore. But every time I turned it on, like in the winter, it's just this cold air would come out forever. And in the summer, heat would come out before the cold air would get cold because I didn't have enough insulation there. So I'm not really happy about forced air systems in attics. We just did one in up north of here. We did all the forced air in the ground, And the minute you get down to a certain depth, and most of that forced air is 2 feet and below, once you get down to around the 3, 4, 5 feet, it's a constant temperature. So you're not going to deal with really cold temperatures in the attic or really hot temperatures in the attic. It's going to be a lot more efficient system. But again, that's more money to put it under the ground. Not that much more, but to me, it was worth it, especially in a cold environment.
I have to go pick up Greer.
Okay, so she's going to pick up her
Bye,
daughter.
everyone.
See you, sweetie. Okay, next question. SM Build. Hello, SM Build. Welcome back. Thinking about the fires in SoCal, what could have been done or retrofit to make the house less prone to fire? A house built or bricks?
On the roof.
Yeah, sprinklers on the roof. I'm serious about that. I almost did it with the mountain build I had. I just didn't have time to do it. But I would have told my plumber, please take a 1-inch PEX line, okay, and run it to the roof. And let's say our roof is this long, okay, and run it to the both ends of that. And then just before you get to the roof, about 5 inches below that, I want you to put a bronze or a galvanized pipe and stick it through the roof, the same size needed for a nice rainbird. And I'd penetrate the roof on that. And then I saw a gentleman. My wife showed me a picture of a home burning from the inside, even though it had a metal roof. It wasn't burning on the roof because somebody left a window open, and the fire got in the window and just torched the inside. But the whole roof was just fine. You saw all these flames on the inside torching it. So the roof has to be metal, either aluminum or a galvanized standing seam. Aluminum is going to be your best bet. That takes care of the roof. Your soffit and fascia has to be aluminum. It can't be paint grade something. And if you do anything paint grade, that's going to toast it as well. The worst thing you can do is a tile roof. That's how all those homes in Southern California burned. The wind was whipping up. Embers from a neighboring fire would get underneath that tile. And because of the high winds and the hot temperature and those embers, and what's underneath all that tile? Tar paper. Okay? That's how all those homes burnt down. Majority of them because of that. So if you take care of a roof that's got just metal and it can't get underneath there, and your eaves are aluminum, full fascia and soffit eaves, then no venting. Okay. The other problem is that the roofs have this venting system, and embers would come under the eaves, get inside the attic, and start torching the attic. So you can't have any ventilation under your eaves. And I believe in most places in California, that's illegal now. But if you have solid soffit, aluminum soffit, that's going to solve for that. The next part is your wall structure. Now, if you do some sort of on the home I just did up north, I did regular stick build, 2x6 stick build, and I have it insulated. But on the outside of that, I have 1.5 inches of rigid rock wool. And then my batten board is hardy, concrete board, okay? I'm willing to bet that if I were to have built that home and I had some sprinklers on the roof on top of all that, the home would not have been touched at all, period. And why we don't build like that, I don't know. Because when you look at fires, when they come through, we're talking about the average door here, I think, is about a 3 or 4 hour fire rating. All right. If we can make a door between a garage and the main living a rating that can last that long, we should at least do that on the exterior of our homes. So, but a lot of people like the low profile Spanish tile, S tile, that kind of stuff, and they want the look of the home, not realizing that what they're doing is creating a potential nightmare. Okay. And it's the roofs and the eaves. That's how most of the damage is done. Okay. But if they did stucco with at least 1 inch of rock wool on there, there's no way that fire is going to get inside that home. It has to go to the eaves and the roofs. And if you have those to refract a lot of heat out, just as a side note, when you see volcanologists go to volcanoes, they're wrapped in aluminum. All right. They're refracting a massive amount of that heat back out. That's why I like aluminum shingle roofs. So I'll say no more. Okay, hype stonks. The water pressure on my supply lines was pumped up to 102 PSI by my plumber, and the pressure has gone down to 70 over the course of a few weeks. The plumber says it's not an issue. claiming temp changes. Do I need to get the plumber back out to look at this? Is it affecting the pressure in your shower? It also could be your backflow device or your pressure reducer valve that's coming in to the home. Most pressure, PSI pressure, is greater on the outside of the home before it even comes into the main structure of the home. There's a pressure reducer valve right there, or even a backflow device. Some of those things could be affecting it. The other thing could be your civil water source. Sometimes they change the pressure. If you've got a fire going on, it's all part of the same system. They're going to tap into that and drop your PSI. That's another problem they had in California. There's so much drain on the water system that it just, the PSI strength went through the toilet. They didn't have enough head support to maintain that.
Is the plumber the best person to find out?
Yeah, you can talk to the plumber and ask him why he might think that dropped PSI. And if you do have a problem with PSI changing all the time, you can put a diaphragm inside your system, and that's a little tank about this big. And when water pressure comes, it fills up that diaphragm. So if there's a drop in water pressure outside the system with the utilities, then that diaphragm is going to maintain that pressure up to a certain point. And a lot of hotels in the backwoods area and mountain areas, they have those to maintain that pressure in case it drops for whatever reason. So, okay, Jeremy, how long can plywood on the roof stay under rain? I'm not sure about plywood. I know OSB, like I mentioned earlier, can maintain 3 rainstorms. I wouldn't like to see, there's a plywood you can get that is treated. It's a little more expensive and it can withstand a lot more rainstorms. But that plywood, if you've ever seen plywood, especially OSB, it's on the edges of the plywood. Water gets underneath all that and expands it. And so I wouldn't, maybe 1 rainstorm, 2. I don't like to see it get wet any more than that. That's why I try to time, like today, I saw my framers on a job. They're about 3 days out. So I'm constantly reminding my roofer, please, let's get this dried in as soon as you possibly can. So you have to time that. Do not let that sit. And don't assume your roofers know what's going on. They sometimes watch the weather. They're pretty good at that. But a lot of times they're not watching the weather for you. And they're not watching for your product and materials. So I wouldn't want to see that get. That's the only zip system I like is on the roof. Because the minute it's up, they tape it, it's sealed that fast. That's the only place I like the zip systems. But I'd get it covered as quick as I could. Keith Merrill, great name, Keith. Are you seeing a lot of new starts up there? Things have slowed down a lot for me down here in Camp Verde, northern Arizona. I am an excavation contractor, mostly doing new residential builds. It's kind of tapered off a bit. There's a lot of work, but it's just there's so much work for such a long period of time that there's a lot of saturated contractors. Meaning there's a lot of excavators, a lot of electricians, a lot of that, because we've had such good work for such a long time. Now up north in Iron County and some other counties, it's different. There's so much growth that they utilize the talent from the next county over, which is Washington County, where I'm at. And so there might be some more growth up that way. I know the mountain areas, there's a lot of growth in that. It's just a matter of how much time can you give to build a business and hopefully get a footing. And it takes some time. And once you do get that footing, you don't want to give it up. So you keep up, and hopefully over time you can square away an opportunity here. So Paul Johnson, hello Team Kelch. That's my HVAC. Do you think that, this is from Alon, do you think that beachfront sandy sections should be avoided? Or are there solutions for solid foundations? It's really a matter of the foundation that the engineer designs for that sandy section. I'm not scared of that at all. In fact, Paul Johnson, he'll vouch for this. I prepped a foundation for him that was literally pure sand. And I got a 98% compaction because I had to wet the sucker. And so about how well prepped that foundation is, before you even pour your foundation. And they may call for a wider spread footing to accommodate for possible instability of that sand, but that doesn't scare me. You can do piers, and that depends on how deep you go with the piers too. And it could be 17 feet, 16 feet, 8 feet. And you never know what the engineer finds after looking at the soils report, and those two combined tell you what you should do. So sand doesn't scare me. In fact, I actually kind of prefer over rock, especially in seismic areas. People think I'm nuts, but I like a home to give. When a home doesn't give, like CMU block walls, a person asked me this morning, should I build an omniblock home in a seismic area? And I said to her, I would prefer to build an omniblock home in a high hurricane environment and a high tornado environment, but I probably wouldn't do it in a high earthquake environment, because an omniblock home is so rigid, anything that moves it, suddenly it's going to crack in a lot of spots, unless it's totally reinforced in ways you can't even imagine. So with a stick-built home with seismic proofing on it, it's going to give like that. And so that's why I like a little bit of sand. It's going to shake and bake a little bit, but it's not like a solid rigid thing where it's going to jar you. So it's kind of like a drunken alcoholic and they're driving. Why do they avoid accidents and they don't get injured? Because they're so loose, and when they hit something, their whole body is already loose and it kind of gives like that. The worst thing you can do is tense up like that, and you're not alcoholic, and you tense up, and all that tension, it just gets torn and just ripped apart. So the more give you can have, a lot of tall skyscrapers are that way. They give. So just some thoughts to think about, some basic physics. Okay, MG, is there anything I should worry about with the shared well arrangement? Can you have a well inspected property is advertised with a shared well?
Yeah, a shared well. There are some issues with shared wells. Power overuse. Who's going to pay for things? Are you going to be able to split costs? What if somebody's having a hard time? What if they're out of work? So costs, use, if something's changed with that. So there are problems. So do your due diligence. I don't have my list in front of me, but I have a thing about shared wells. But yes, you do want to do your due diligence on shared wells.
Okay, the best question to look at is the flow rate. How much water can actually come out of that well, given a typical, say, 1 horsepower pump, sub pump, and you can find out your flow rate. That's the first thing. If there's a sufficient flow rate, you should be fine. I'm doing that with 2 families, working with them on a contract, and they're side by side, and they're sharing one well. So I asked them to find out what their flow rate is. The second thing to find out is can you store some of that water? And again, that's where the diaphragm comes into play. If you have a 30 or 40 gallon diaphragm, it pumps it into the diaphragm, and that diaphragm pressures your system. So you have sustained PSI for a certain amount of time. And so those combinations are things to look at. And then, how much total waters? Is it a quarter acre of water or a foot of acre water feet for the year? How much water do you actually have the potential for drawing down over a course of a year? And its flow rate. So check those things out.
Another thing is who has the power, because you're going to have to share the power to the well. So who's paying that bill? So I heard a story of a family, and they were sharing the well, and the daughter wanted to move. Well, the dad just kept turning the well off. He had the power, so she wouldn't move. She couldn't sell the property. So there are stories out there. So you have to know who and what with the power and utilities and everything with the well.
Yeah, a lot of subdivisions in rural areas are on a well. There's just north of me. There's a lot of subdivisions. They're on a shared well, and that's now a civic or a well business where you're all part of the whole thing. But if it's just between 2 people, that's some of the nightmares my wife's talking about. It can be a hairy situation. So hopefully you share it with other people, and then there's an office that's managing it, and then there shouldn't be an issue. But Okay, next one. Paul, what is the code in Southern California on crawl space ventilation? Southern Utah for crawl space ventilation. I've never even looked at the code on that. I just go by building science and kind of square footage. Remember the home we did up there in Pine Valley, the old restoration? We actually had a stem wall that was cut up quite nasty like in an old restoration project. I had to put a 4-inch pipe through all the wall system. So I have 2 vents up front, and then I'm pulling air, and then I put vents underneath the cabinets. I don't know if you recall that, Paul, but I put a vent underneath the cabinets. So I'm pulling air from inside, and I'm taking it through the crawl space, and I'm taking it out to the front of the home. So I had 2 vents on probably 1,000 square feet on that main level. So my crawl space is probably around 900 square feet with the foundation there. So about 2 vents for that. But I would never build a crawl space without a vent. And I know a lot of people do makeup air and CRB air, and they do the full envelope and the encasement of the crawl space and do all this high stuff. I'm not that. I like the insulation factor, but I like to have some ventilation to the outside, especially for any potential high water issues or any moisture buildup. You just don't want that. I'll tell you, a nightmare was working with a job, I won't mention where, and they framed it. They framed the house on a stem wall. Well, they did that after a snowstorm, and they had 2 feet of snow inside that stem wall. They framed it and they capped it. They came back, super heavy snowstorm. They came back 3 weeks later. Then they cut in the crawl space to get access to it. Underneath, mold everywhere because there's no ventilation. There's no way to extricate or dry off all of that wood product down below in that crawl space. So that's how important ventilation is for crawl space. And some people like to seal it off so much because they're so concerned about heating costs and utility costs. I'm most concerned with mold buildup, and that's why I want it ventilated. And then I insulate the floor. Okay, so talk with a local building person, and they can tell you your particular area, and they can give you some good feedback on there. But I do a little overkill on my ventilation, so I wouldn't want to tell you what I do because I do it a little more than what most people do. So. Okay, Life with Callie. I want most of my ceilings to be 10 feet. If I want the family room to be 11, which is cheaper, 11 flat ceiling or 10 foot sloped to 11? I don't know how you do, unless it's a coffered ceiling where you it's the framing that's going to be costly. So if you want to have an open living area that's suddenly 10 feet, it's just framing that out so your drywallers can come in and do that coffered. So you're going to have to call and contact your framer to ask them, hey, can you frame this? And if you do, what's it going to cost? And then the drywaller is going to charge you a little bit more because now they have all that extra either bullnose or square flashing, and that's a little more work to have to flash and paint or tape and texture all that.
It's just bolted.
If that's hard, I can't imagine that. That's a lot of work just to vault that. It's mostly your framer. See what they can do for you. I would just talk with a good framer and see how can you vault this without any 90-degree angle. It's just a subtle vault and see what they can do. So it's just a good framer might be able to help you. Eric Bystrom, is R21 spray foam under the roof deck enough to create a conditioned attic? Installers say it's code, but is it enough? We're in Panama City, Florida. Thank you. If you've known me for any bit of time, I don't recommend any spray foam under any roof at all, period. Because if there's a leak on that roof, and most of the time there is, you will never see it, and it's going to rot away at the substrate of the framing, and it will destroy your roof. So I'm not a fan of that. However, I am a fan of a rigid mineral wool product and stuff it right up in there underneath that roof deck, and that's going to be your best bet. The roof will be able to breathe, but you're also going to get the R value, and you're going to get that added support. And talk with them and ask what the local building office is asking for. Now, in your particular area, One of the reasons why they're asking for some rigid foam is because it adds for hurricane strength. It's actually structural to some degree. And adding that additional structural support underneath that roof is a lot of the reasons why some people are doing it, but I still wouldn't do it. I just beef up my trusses, and I beef up my roofing substantially to handle that. And I'd let my underlayment of my roof breathe, and I'd shove in some good, about 2 inches of rigid rock wool between all those trusses, and I'd solve it right there. So that's just me. Okay, next level lawn care. I've recently purchased a plot of land, and I've been working with the designer for the floor plans, but I haven't spoke with a builder yet. Am I out of order? I don't have the time to do the build myself. You're not out of order. The only thing I'd recommend is to take the First Steps course on howtobuildyourownhome.com, and you take the third module especially, and that will tell you the real cost per square foot in your particular area, and you should be designing with that in mind. If you don't know the cost per square foot in your area for standard builder grade quality, then you're designing in the dark. You're designing without knowing what that cost is. It could be $1.75, it could be $2.25, it could be $600 a square foot. I don't know. It depends on where you are building. And if you don't do that course, you're in the dark. I strongly recommend everyone take that First Steps course. It's really affordable. What is it, $49? Mm-hmm. And it's got 13 modules, and it's got formulas to help you figure out a lot of information. Just as a side note, when you do take that course, at the very end, the last module, it gives you a coupon code to get you a discount on the self-managed course. A lot of students don't remember that. They forget that coupon code. So remember, it's on the last module.
The checklists are good for when it's being built anyway.
Yeah. So it's going to help you. That First Steps course is really going to help you. So, okay. Next one. Nick Felt. Her name was Stephanie Felt. That was a student of mine. I don't know if you knew Stephanie Felt. She was a student of mine years ago. Do you think that an insulated stem wall crawl space that is vented would perform much better than insulated? You said insulated twice. Do you think that an insulated stem wall crawl space that is vented would perform much better than an insulated? I don't know what you mean by that, because you used insulated twice there. Much better than an uninsulated. Yeah, obviously, yeah, better than an uninsulated. But if they're both insulated and one's vented and one's not, I would shoot you wouldn't want to do a stem wall that's not ventilated. You don't want to do that. You don't want to go there. It's going to be a nightmare. So avoid that. Okay. There is no water to the house. It's a well, but the well hasn't been connected yet. Okay. I'd still find out about, is that the same one as the well permit or the well, shared well?
It's hype socks.
What was that reference to a previous question?
The plumber back out to look at
the
water pressure.
Yeah. Sometimes wells can adjust their pressure based upon the time of year. So like at this time of year, when we haven't had a lot of rain, that water table is going down and down and down. It's affecting your water pressure. Okay. So if you have a well pump and it's submerged in 6-8 feet of water and you're drawing from that, that's going to have a certain amount of well pressure. But if that head pressure comes down substantially, that's going to affect your PSI also. So you might want to check all that. So Josh James, is 716 OSB good enough for roof, 16 on center trusses, or 1532 better? Thicker is always better. Stay away from the thin stuff. And here's the reason why. If you have a snow load, it's going to affect it. If you're going to put asphalt shingles on that roof, you're going to see the roof do this kind of thing with a thinner sheet. Now, you can do it. Code allows it. Builders do it all the time. I don't do it. I do 1932s on my roofs. It's a much richer roof. It holds a lot of snow load, handles wind much better. And when the roofers put their fasteners in there, they've got more meat to bite into to hold the roofing down. That's going to increase your wind gust capacity substantially, the thicker your roof. The worst thing you can do is a really cheap, thin roof on your roof. I just avoid it. So, okay, next one. Nick Felt, how much warmer do you think that an insulated stem wall crawl space that is vented than an uninsulated crawl space? It's really a matter of how much insulation you stick in the floor. So don't worry about the cool temperatures of a crawl space. Worry about the insulation under the floor. So if you've got, let's say, R30 under your floor, it's not going to affect your upstairs at all, right? So therefore, you want that ventilation. It's not like a home with piers where you got massive airflow underneath there. It's constricted substantially with just a couple of vents, but those vents are just enough to keep mildew from building up underneath your home. That's why you want it vented, to keep the mildew from building up. Okay. Yeah, I need some water. Zach, last question. Great. Any tips for someone looking to make a career change into home building with the long-term goal of being a GC? I was a freelance videographer for 9 years with my own company, ready for something new. Thanks. The best tip I can give you that would just be stress-free and allow you to transition into the whole arena is to be your own builder for your own home first. So if you are a videographer and you're able to qualify for something, and you can just do something super simple, super rock bottom and get your feet wet, and it will get you through the entire process. And make sure you use the self-managed package and how to build your own home. It's the most detailed training for construction management that's out there. It'll give you everything you need. And then do as much as you can, learn about as much, talk with guys on the trades. And then I would look into, and depending upon your age, but if you're like 30, I'd go ahead and become an apprentice electrician or something, get some mechanical experience, and then get a structural experience, excavation, concrete framing, one of those two. And I have a young student that I'm building a home for his parents, and he's now left the mechanical arena, and he knows who he is. He's left the mechanical arena. He was an HVAC contractor. Now he wants to learn excavation. So if you get your feet wet in those two areas, you're really going to be off to the races. And then it's a matter of building rapport and networking with people and being sustainable in that whole pursuit. And meanwhile, don't give up your day job. Just make this a side hustle. And eventually that side hustle can be a main hustle. And then you now have a side hustle with the original main hustle. So eventually be able to trade positions. Okay. That's the best advice I can give you. And take your time and be on the job, learn from people, talk with them, ask them questions. And if you like to talk, these are people you want to do business with. Okay. Anything else? Hey, that's it. Thanks everybody for being here. Again, we'll be here next Thursday from 5 to 6 Mountain Standard Time. Have your questions ready. Write them down on a piece of paper. So when you come, we can just barrel through a lot of stuff. It's going to be fun. And look for more posts to come on our YouTube channel. A lot of new builds this year. A lot. Various different climate zones. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So look forward to it. See you guys next week. Take care.